You feel it in your chest before you can explain it. That strange emptiness, that moment when you wake up and realize the people you counted on aren't there anymore. The texts go unanswered. The doors that once opened for you now creak shut without warning. The silence isn't peaceful, it's loud, and it starts to feel like maybe something is wrong with you, like you're the reason why everything is slipping away. You didn't ask to be alone. You didn't choose the silence. You didn't expect that the people you supported would disappear when it was your turn to lean on someone. But here you are, still standing, barely breathing, pretending like everything's okay when your soul is breaking beneath the surface. This is the kind of loneliness no one warns you about. It's not about being physically alone. It's about being emotionally invisible, about being surrounded by people who see your face, but don't notice your pain. You go through the motion. You smile when they ask how you're doing, but deep inside, a voice is screaming, "God, where is everyone? Why am I being left behind?" And if you've ever been there, if you're there now, you know this isn't just life being hard. It feels surgical, intentional, like something or someone is deliberately pulling things away from you. And maybe that's exactly what's happening, because sometimes God will isolate you so thoroughly that the only voice left in the room is His, not as punishment. Not because He's forgotten you, but because He wants to separate you from the noise that's been shaping your identity. Some things can only be built in solitude. The kind of strength you're going to need isn't trained in comfort. It's forged in the dark, in the quiet, in the places where you have no one to impress and nowhere to hide. God doesn't call crowds to form warriors. He calls them away. Think about Moses. Before he ever stood in front of Pharaoh, he spent 40 years in the wilderness, with nothing but sheep and shame. Before David ever wore a crown, he was running for his life through caves. And before Jesus stepped into public ministry, he was driven into the wilderness by the Spirit, not by the devil, but by the Spirit, to fast and fight in silence. Every person God ever used greatly had to first be separated painfully. You're not being rejected, you're being refined. But refinement doesn't feel holy while it's happening. It feels like loss. It feels like failure, like the universe is out of sync and everyone else is moving forward while you're stuck in a loop of silence. And in that stillness, the enemy whispers, "See, no one's coming. You're forgotten. You're replaceable." But that is a lie. God doesn't isolate the broken to abandon them. He isolates them to rebuild them without interruption. Because when everyone leaves, you're finally forced to see who never left. When everything falls apart, the only thing that remains is what was never supposed to leave in the first place, His presence. We often think of separation as punishment, but in heaven's language, separation is preparation. When God separates you, He's not pushing you away. He's pulling you closer, closer to clarity, closer to purpose, closer to yourself. And it's in that stillness, that isolation, that a deeper truth begins to surface. You've been holding too tightly to things that couldn't carry the weight of your calling. You've been anchoring your identity in temporary affirmation. You've been placing your trust in people who could only walk with you to the edge of your transformation, but not through it. God had to pull them away so you could finally meet who you are without their shadow standing over you. This pain you're feeling, it's sacred. It's not the evidence that you're falling apart. It's the evidence that something deeper is being formed, because you're not being punished. You're being pulled aside, set apart, marked. And yes, it hurts. It hurts to lose what you thought you needed. It hurts to watch everyone else seem to thrive while you're barely holding on. It hurts to pray and hear nothing, to beg for answers and get silence. But maybe silence is the answer. Maybe the reason you're not hearing anything is because God already whispered the truth long ago. You just couldn't hear it over the noise. Now that the noise is gone, you're finally able to sense something else. The slow, steady work of a God who doesn't need to rush. He is not in a hurry because He is not improvising. He saw this season before you ever stepped into it, and instead of preventing it, He prepared it. because he knew what it would produce in you. That's why this isolation feels so personal, because it is. You're not random. You're not forgotten. You're not disqualified. You are being stripped of every false dependency, so that when the time comes to carry what only the chosen can bear, your hands will be free. People may not understand it. You may not understand it, but heaven does. And that's why you're still breathing. That's why you're still standing. Because what's falling apart on the outside is making room for what's being built on the inside. There is nothing wasted in your pain. Not a tear, not a sigh, not a sleepless night. It's all being collected, all being recorded, all being transformed into strength you didn't know you had. This isn't just a low season, it's holy ground. And the loneliness you feel right now, it's not abandonment. It's the first whisper of a new identity being formed in silence. Some of the deepest wounds we carry come from the misunderstanding of what silence really means. We mistake God's quietness for His absence. We confuse separation with abandonment. And worst of all, we start believing that the loss we're experiencing is a reflection of our worth. But what if the exact opposite is true? What if the silence is not punishment, but precision? What if the separation you're feeling is not a sign of disqualification, but of divine selection? We talk about being called by God, but rarely do we talk about the cost. Because before any crown, there is always a cutting. Before the blessing, there's often a breaking. And before anyone is trusted with glory, they are tested in the shadows. Think about how gold is refined. It's not just heated, it's melted. It's broken down to its most vulnerable state, so that all the impurities can rise to the surface and be removed. The process isn't pretty. It's violent, it's hot, it's uncomfortable, but it's necessary. And you, yes, you, are going through that same process. Because you're not average. God doesn't waste fire on those who have nothing to carry. He's separating you not to leave you alone, but to isolate the exact thing He placed inside you that the world isn't ready for yet. You've been asking God to use you. You've begged Him to open doors, to show you your purpose, to accelerate your path. But acceleration without transformation is just self-destruction waiting to happen. And God loves you too much to rush you into rooms that your character isn't ready to sustain. So He slows you down. He shuts the doors. He removes the crowd. He takes away what made you feel important so that He can show you what makes you unshakable. Because what you're going through right now isn't a delay. It's a reset, a recalibration, a refining. You are being chosen, but not the way you expected. Heaven doesn't select with applause. It selects with separation. You weren't called to blend in. You were called to break patterns, and that always comes with a cost. Look at Joseph, separated from his family, betrayed by his brothers, sold into slavery, falsely accused, forgotten in prison. From the outside, it looked like rejection, like the world had turned its back on him. But from heaven's perspective, every moment of pain was a stitch in the garment of his destiny. Because when the time came, when famine hit and nations trembled, God didn't raise up someone popular. He raised up someone prepared. And preparation always requires separation. You don't train in the spotlight. You train in the shadows. You sharpen your sword in silence. You learn to hear God clearly when no one else's voice is around to drown Him out. That's where true strength is built. And that's where you are right now. It doesn't matter who left you. It doesn't matter what they said. It doesn't matter how quiet the phone is, how slow the progress feels, or how invisible your efforts seem. Because God saw it all. He was watching when you stayed faithful with nothing. He took note when you showed up, even when your heart was tired. He recorded every tear, and He's using every ounce of it to mold a vessel that's not just strong, but sacred. The kind of vessel that can carry what others can't. The kind of person that doesn't just survive storms, but learns how to command them. You may not feel powerful, but that's exactly why you're becoming dangerous. Because real power isn't loud. It doesn't demand attention. It doesn't flex for the crowd. Real power is hidden until the moment it's needed. And when that moment comes, you'll know why you had to be set apart. You'll see that the very things you begged God to remove were actually the things that trained you to hold what's coming. You'll understand that the isolation was never about keeping people away. It was about bringing purpose close. This season may look like loss, but heaven is counting it as alignment. You are not being overlooked. You are being trusted. Because only those who've been alone with God can be trusted to speak for Him, and only those who've been broken without an audience can be trusted to lead without needing applause. The world celebrates performance. Heaven honors surrender. And you've been surrendering more than you think, deeper than you realize. So if you feel like you're falling behind, like life is moving forward and you're stuck watching from the sidelines, I want you to pause, look around, listen closer. Because you're not being passed over, you're being positioned. And when the time comes, when the page turns and the curtain rises, you won't need to prove yourself. Your preparation will speak for itself. Your scars will speak of battles no one saw but God. Your voice will carry the weight of silence, and your spirit will echo the strength of every step you took when no one was cheering. That is what separation creates. Not just strength, but sacred authority. And it's already being written into your story, whether you feel it or not, whether you see it or not, whether anyone else recognizes it or not. It's there, and it's growing. There's a kind of strength that doesn't make noise. It doesn't shout for attention, doesn't post itself online, doesn't even always look like strength from the outside. But it's the kind of strength that moves mountains when no one is watching. And it's the kind of strength that only grows in hidden places. That's what you're being trained for. You see, when God calls someone, He doesn't just hand them a platform, He leads them into the wilderness. Because the wilderness strips away what the crowd would validate so He can rebuild you with what heaven can trust. And in that silent, uncelebrated, seemingly empty place, that's where the roots start to go deep. God is not just planting a tree in, He's building a forest. And that takes time. No one sees the roots growing beneath the surface. No one applauds the days you got out of bed when your soul didn't want to move. No one notices the inner fights, the private prayers, the invisible victories. But those are the battles that matter most. That's where real authority is forged. It's easy to speak from knowledge. It's another thing entirely to speak from pain. People listen to experience. They feel it. They resonate with it. They can tell when a voice comes not just from a mouth, but from a wound. That's why God is letting you walk through this, not because He's forgotten you, but because He's preparing to speak through you. Do you remember David? Everyone saw him as the boy who killed Goliath, but before that moment of glory, there were years of silence, years in the field, years defending sheep no one cared about, years of playing his harp for an audience of one. And it was in those years that something unshakable was built. David didn't kill the giant because he was brave. He killed him because he was trained, not by the battlefield, but by solitude, by hardship, by rejection. He knew how to fight lions and bears long before anyone ever clapped for him. And when the moment came, he didn't shrink. He didn't overthink. He simply stepped into what he had already been shaped for. God does the same with you. Every sleepless night, every no you didn't understand, every delay that made you question your worth, every door that didn't open, every friend that walked away. They weren't detours, they were design. Because if you got what you wanted too soon, you'd hold it with trembling hand. But when it comes after the fire, when it follows the famine, you hold it with holy reverence. You know what it cost. You know what it took to still believe when believing got you nothing. That kind of faith isn't weak. It's dangerous, because now, nothing can buy you. Nothing can flatter you. Nothing can shake you. You didn't build your faith on comfort. You built it on survival. And people will feel that. They'll hear it when you speak. They'll see it in your eyes. They'll sense it in the way you walk into a room and don't need to dominate, because you've already fought the fight behind the curtain. You've already faced the demons no one could see. And you didn't just survive, you surrendered. There's a mystery to those who've been through real spiritual fire. They move differently. They speak slowly, but every word carries weight. They love deeply, but with discernment. They walk softly, but they stand like mountains when storms come. And that's who you're becoming. This isn't a season of nothing. This is a season of formation. Your heartbreak is not wasted. Your delay is not punishment. Your confusion is not failure. It's training. God is tuning your ears to His frequency. He's removing the noise. He's emptying your hands so He can place in them something eternal. And that process can feel cruel. It can feel like the ground is disappearing, like everything familiar is being ripped away. But sometimes God can only build something new when there's nothing left to cling to. And you've been clinging to a past version of you, to a vision that no longer fits, to relationships that were good for the old season but can't breathe in the new one. So He's letting it all fall, not to destroy you, but to redefine you. And while it may look like loss from the outside, heaven sees it as alignment. You're shedding what the world put on you so you can wear what God intended for you. And that transition isn't clean. It's not polite. It's brutal, but it's holy. God doesn't rush transformation. He deepens it. He waits until the roots can handle the weight of what's coming. He waits until your joy doesn't depend on outcomes, until your peace isn't tied to validation, until your identity is no longer on the auction block of human approval, because only then can He trust you to carry what others can't. This world is full of noise, full of speed, full of shallow answers, but you were never meant to echo the chaos. You were meant to be a whisper of heaven in the middle of the storm. And that voice takes time to build. It takes seasons of silence, of frustration, of wondering why your life doesn't look like theirs. But God isn't writing your story based on trends. He's writing it based on truth. And the truth is this: you are not behind. You are not broken. You are not invisible. You are becoming something rare, and rare things take time. There comes a moment in every deep transformation when God doesn't just prune you, He removes you from places you once called home, from people you thought were permanent, from routines that made you feel in control. And it doesn't feel holy at first. It feels like exile. You look around and realize that what once gave you meaning no longer speaks your language. Conversations that used to inspire you now feel hollow. People who once understood your heart now misunderstand your silence. And places that once felt like destiny now feel like distraction. It's disorienting, confusing, and if you're not careful, you'll think something's wrong with you. But what's really happened is that God is separating you, not because you failed, but because you grew. And your environment didn't grow with you. You outgrew conversations that were built on insecurity. You outgrew rhythms that were shaped by survival. You outgrew versions of yourself that kept you safe but small. And now you're being called to breathe in a higher altitude. But here's the thing about high places: they're lonely. And most people don't want to go there because it costs too much. The higher you go, the more oxygen you lose. You can't carry everything with you. You can't drag everyone with you. And you can't keep looking back at what you've outlived and expect to stay sane. You are not being punished. You are being purified. And that's what separation really is. It's not rejection. It's refinement. The call of God will always come with a severing, a cutting away, a letting go of what cannot survive in the next chapter. That's why so many of your prayers right now feel like silence. It's not because God isn't speaking. It's because He's shifting your hearing. He's tuning your ears to something deeper, something that can only be discerned when the noise dies down. And the noise will die. The applause, the attention, the affirmation that once held you up. Because God won't let anything else become your foundation. He's building something in you that can only be sustained by intimacy with Him, not by crowds, not by validation, not even by ministry, just Him. And that kind of intimacy feels like loss at first. It feels like abandonment, but it's actually invitation into stillness, into fire, into clarity. God is separating you to show you what was never real to begin with. The relationships that only loved the version of you that performed. The systems that only affirmed you when you were useful. The cycles that kept you addicted to doing so, you wouldn't have to feel. And he's stripping it away, not to shame you, but to save you. Because what's coming next is weighty, not just in responsibility, but in glory. And you can't carry that if your soul is still tethered to things that crumble when the spotlight fades. So he hides you, not to waste you, but to weld you into something unshakable. Think of Joseph. He had a dream, a real one. But before that dream came true, everything he touched seemed to fall apart. Betrayed by his brothers, sold into slavery, falsely accused, thrown in prison, forgotten. Years of silence, years of being misunderstood, years of being hidden. But all of it was part of the preparation. God wasn't just putting Joseph in power. He was preparing Joseph to carry power without being poisoned by it. And that only happens in hidden places. You're in one of those places now. It doesn't look like promotion. It doesn't feel like breakthrough, but it's holy ground. It's where your identity is being redefined, not by applause, but by fire, not by performance, but by presence, not by people, but by purpose. You can't be who God called you to be and stay who you used to be. And that shedding is painful. It's the tearing away of armor you no longer need, the kind you built to survive trauma, the kind that protected you from rejection, the kind that made you feel safe but left you numb. God is taking it off, layer by layer, so that what's underneath, the raw, surrendered, broken you, can finally breathe. Because that's the version he wants to use, not the polished one, not the Instagram-worthy one, not the one who has all the answers, the one who has scars and still says yes, the one who doubts and still prays, the one who cries at night but wakes up and keeps walking. That's the vessel God trusts. That's the person he anoints. That's who you're becoming. So don't resist the separation. Don't fight the loneliness. Don't try to run back to what no longer fits. Just because it's familiar, God is calling you out, because he's about to send you in. But he will never send you into the next level with baggage from the last. So let it fall. Let the image go. Let the identity collapse. Let the expectations dissolve. Let the version of yourself that kept you small die in the wilderness, so the one he intended can rise in the spirit. You are not who you were, and you don't need to be anymore. This separation is sacred. This loneliness is sacred. This silence is sacred, because God is doing something in you that can't be rushed. He's not making you stronger. He's making you deeper. And depth always comes through distance.